What's good, everybody? It's the Bricklord, and I'm back with another video, and I am pumped because this is probably my most anticipated video in quite some time because it's an updated Ninjago ranking the seasons. And if anybody is new to the channel and doesn't know, these are my favorite type of videos to make, not necessarily even just rankings, but especially ranking the seasons. And it's always such a treat when I get to remake and redo these videos. And like I said, I am pumped. As many of you might know, Crystalized just dropped as of the time of this video, full HD worldwide, and it is a perfect time to do an updated Ninjago ranking the seasons. And like I said, I am pumped, so excited for this. And I don't want to talk too long in this intro because I want to get right into the good stuff, which is what many of you are wanting to hear. My opinions on ranking all the installments and what I think is the worst and what I think is the best and where Crystalized now falls in the list. Again, I don't want to talk too much longer. Just want to mention, of course, this will include all the numbered seasons, and then, of course, Pilots, Day of the Departed Island, all that good stuff. And like I said, don't want to talk too much longer because I am pumped. I want to get right into this video. So let's go ahead and jump right into this ranking. And in the number 18 is Season 11, Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu, and still in last place, and by far my least favorite season. Now, I'm not as critical of this as I was as of the time when I did my last ranking the season, because I have since went back and rewatched through Season 11. Now, is it still a bad season? Absolutely. There is many problems with it. The fire chapter is bland, boring, takes too long to get going. Asphira is a poor villain, and ultimately the fire chapter just drags along. Also, Clutch Powers is a very horribly written character. And then as far as the ice chapter, it has a better setting, better villain army, but then there's also other major problems like the anime episodes. Also, the filler is still bad as well. But ultimately, this season is a season where I feel potential was there. Like, there was lots of great concepts, and they were just executed to the poorest of poor. And ultimately, there is still good scenes here and there that I can pick out. So the season is not totally worthless, but there is far more mistakes than there is wins in this season. And ultimately, this season is still by far my least favorite Ninjago installment. And in the number 17 is Season the Island. And yes, I'm calling it Season the Island because I'm not getting into a stupid numbering debate over the seasons. With that out of the way, yes, it's in the number 17 spot. The Island, I feel, is a pretty bad season. Ultimately, it's a season that I feel, again, had potential, but was executed absolutely poorly. I mean, for starters, the 4-episode format, be it 4 11-minute episode format, just absolutely kills this season. I mean, the idea of an exploration, Uncharted type season with this island that was in this storm belt area off in Ninjago sounds awesome, but then was executed and just fell very flat, with 4 episodes just not being enough time to develop the setting or story. I mean, in the poster, we see this big, huge mountain with a snowy peak on it, and I'm sure there was way more island that could have possibly been explored. And so ultimately that just did not work. And then also Clutch Powers, going into this season, I figured, okay, maybe they could really redeem him from season 11, make him the explorer that, he deserved to be, give him a better story. And yet they somehow managed to dig his hole deeper. And then, ultimately though, the season just wasn't that exciting. And then, side characters weren't that great. And then Ronin being the main villain just, did not work. It felt like it undercut, what we have seen of Ronin in like season 5 and season 6. So, that just didn't work for me. So ultimately, there was just many problems and execution errors with this season. I mean, as far as a few good things, The animation was as gorgeous as ever. The ninja suit design was excellent. The keepers looked good. But ultimately, this season was just a setup for Cbound. And, it ultimately fell pretty flat for me personally. And it's just not that great of a season, which is why it sits in the number 17 spot. And yes, in the number 16 for me is Season 10, March of the Oni. And I know, March of the Oni is fairly popular among many Ninjago fans, but for me personally, it's just not that great of a season. Ultimately, though, it's a season, again, I think that had potential, but was just not executed very well. For starters, the 4 episode format, even though, yes, they were 22-minute episodes instead of 11, just did not work. This season needed at least 2 more episodes, if not more. And I just, was not very invested in this season, be it that I wasn't super invested in the Oni trilogy as a whole. And this kind of, did not deliver as a good ending to that trilogy or the Will Film era, as a matter of fact, either. And, Cole's fall in this season did not do too much for me. Whether you watch the episodes back to back or in movie format, that did not have a lasting impact. It was wrapped up pretty quick. And the Oni were just not that great either. They were built up, I think, too much in season 8 and 9, and ultimately were very bland and just weren't that great. Also, the Omega in particular, his voice was very garbled, and you just really could not understand most of his lines most of the time, which was such a shame because he could have been a lot better, sorry. And ultimately, though, just very bland season for me personally. As far as a few good things, Lloyd was a good character, so was Garmadon, and their interaction. Bringing back the golden weapons was cool, but otherwise, though, not too many good things for this season for me personally. It's just kind of a, not so great end to not that great of a trilogy, in my opinion, and that's why March of the Oni Season 10 is this low on my list for me. And for our number 15 is Day of the Departed, and I have this over March of the Oni. Now, am I saying Day of the Departed is a great installment? No. Is there problems? Absolutely. But I like Day of the Departed better. Now, as far as some problems, of course, 45 minutes is not enough time to develop a good installment, and there was just too many plot lines crammed into this, short amount of time, and it did not work. And also, what they did with most of the returning villains just was not that great. Also, Yang was not like the best villain. But as far as a few good things, Cole's story was pretty good. Cole and Yang at the end was also not that bad. And I also liked how they restored the Air Jitsu Temple to its former glory, which was really cool. And I really just liked the message in Day of the Departed with, the remembering your loved ones. And it was a really good message. And I think that's why I like Day of the Departed more than I like March of the Oni. And for me, Day of the Departed is just more rewatchable for me personally. And for those reasons, that's why Day of the Departed is just above March of the Oni. And yes, in the number 14 spot is Season 9 Hunted. And yes, I know I have Season 9 in the number 14 spot, and there are some people watching this video that are probably banging their heads against their devices because they absolutely love Season 9 and can't understand why I have it this low on my list. I will tell you, for me, it's just a very generic run-of-the-mill season. I just, did not feel that excited watching it, and that's probably also in part because I was not already invested in the Oni trilogy. But just as this season, it's just not that exciting for me personally. As far as what I was somewhat invested in, it was more of the First Realm stuff. So the Ninjago stuff really was back burner for me, and I really did not enjoy that at all. As far as some of the First Realm stuff, I mean, there's only so much they could do because it's a gigantic desert. It really was not that exciting. And then the SOG still were not that great. The Dragon Hunters were not that great either, except for Faith and Iron Baron. And the story kind of just drug along as a fact for me. It just really was not that great. I really only got pretty invested with the last 3 episodes, and those I were pretty pumped for. But otherwise, there was a couple episodes like How to Build a Dragon and The Gilded Path, which I thought were pretty good as well. But for me, this season was just not that great, fairly run of the mill, just was not that excited for it. And ultimately, I just wasn't like, wow, that was a great season. I was more like, wow, okay, that was, an installment in Ninjago, and I'm ready for a better season to come. So for me, it's just not that great. And it's probably because the Oni trilogy is just not that great for me. And ultimately, though, I think this is the second best of them. But, for me, just not that great. And yes, in the number 13 spot is Season 8, Sons of Garmadon. And yes, I know I have Sons of Garmadon in the number 13 spot, which means I have the entirety of the Oni trilogy in my bottom 6. I know. You guys can say up and down, left and right, how great, the Oni trilogy and Sons of Garmadon is, and blah, 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 blah. For me, it's just not that great of a season and trilogy, and I think there is far better seasons that are much more watchable for me personally. And, as far as season 8, it actually, started off okay for me. I mean, I think it's a very run-of-the-mill season, all things considered. But it started off pretty good in the premiere, and really the first few episodes were pretty good. And then the season started taking a downward roller coaster through the middle. And then it kind of got to Game of Masks, and I was like, oh, okay, now this is pretty good. This is the Ninjago I like right here. And then I remember watching all the episodes, like back to back. And then we went right into Dread on Arrival. And, I was like pretty pumped. And then, this episode was taking place in the Temple of Resurrection. Harumi was full on evil. And she was trying to resurrect Garmadon. And ultimately, this episode, was a big fight in the temple. And it seemed like the ninjas stopped the ritual just in time. And it was an action-packed episode. And I was like, wow, this was a pretty good finale, right? Right? Wrong. Somehow they decided that was just not good enough to be the finale. And I was like, okay, whatever. So watching them back to back, then, the next episode was True Potential. And I was like, okay, I was kind of not as pumped, but I was like, okay, I'll see what they have in store. And then True Potential, Garmadon, now back immediately. And, learning about his excessively evil dark power. And it ended up being a episode where Lloyd and Garmadon had this big, brutal fight in Cryptarium. And then ultimately by the end, Garmadon had pummeled Lloyd and, tossed him through multiple walls of Cryptarium and outside. And it seemed like Lloyd was, severely injured, possibly about to die. And I was like, okay, you know what? Dread on Arrival, would have been a great finale, but, this will work too. This has got to be the finale, right? Right? Wrong. And somehow they undercut 2 amazing finales for season 8 and gave us this piece of junk of Big Trouble, Little Ninjago for a finale. Oh my God, this finale sucks. And I just was left so unsatisfied with season 8. And I was like, wow, they undercut 2 amazing finales for this. And I was just really like, wow, this is just not that great. And so ultimately for me, it's just not that great of a season. I was very unsatisfied by the end of it because they had, multiple, options to end it incredibly well. And my enjoyment for the season would have been much higher. But ultimately they, squanted the end of the season for something just not nearly as good. So for me, that's why season 8 is this low on my list. And yes, in our number 12 spot is the pilot episodes, and I think these are great. The reason they're this low on the list, and it's definitely not that I don't enjoy them, it's mostly due to the fact that there's just other seasons I like better, And also, they just really can't compete in their length to full seasons. Even if, seasons ahead have an episode here or there that's kind of a dud, the runtime of those is still more than the runtime of the pilots. And ultimately, they're just the 2 pilot episodes. They're still amazing. And besides a few dialogue issues, they're really well done and they still hold up to this day and they're great. It's not to say that the pilots are bad in any way. They just really can't compete with full-length seasons. I still think they're great, but they can't be any higher on the list for me personally, but they're still well done. And in our number 11 spot is season 13, Master of the Mountain. And some people may think that this is too low, but for me, this is just a very average, slightly below average season. And some people are thinking, really? But for me, there's just not that many episodes that I think are that great, and the season very much drags along. Besides the 2-part finale at the end, which I think is done quite well, actually exceptionally well. It's a very well done finale. I hardly watch anything but that. Also, the episode The Darkest Hour, Griefbringer, The Skull Sorcerer, those are a few other pretty good episodes as well, but really, I hardly ever watch anything but that 2-part finale, which is just not enough to justify this season being much higher, and ultimately, there's just too much that drags along. Also, there's the just, backstory ruining anime episode that has no business being here. And yeah, the season is just pretty drab and dry. As for a few good things, exploring Cole as a character, learning more about Lily, and the Skull Sorcerer was an amazing villain. All of those are just good things about the season. But besides those and that finale, it's really just not enough to justify this season being any higher on my list. And in our number 10 spot is season 6, Skybound. And for me, we're now in territory of seasons that I think are good, and there's nothing, major glaringly wrong with them, but they're, not top tier seasons for me. They're fairly rewatchable, and that's, the territory we're in. And for me, that's, what I think about Skybound. And I think that there's nothing, majorly wrong with it. And I totally understand people who think Skybound is, a top tier season for them and they like it a lot. I get it. It totally makes sense. And I see why people put it as high as they do. For me, there's plenty of good things. Nauticon is an amazing villain. Jay and Nia are well done in this season. And, there's plenty of good episodes. Also, the finale, as controversial as it may be for some people, for me, it's a good point. I really like it personally. And really, also some other good episodes, Wishmasters, Misfortune Rising, those are good episodes as well. The only part of this season I would say that sort of suffers is it takes a minute to get going. We really need Nauticon there to get the ball rolling, but then once he shows up, the season gets moving, and there's just a little bit of a slow point in the middle for me. But otherwise, though, this season is pretty darn amazing. Also, Last Resort, I know people will kind of think, hey, you didn't mention that, is also a good point in the season as well. So ultimately, plenty of great things about Skybound. For me, it's just not a top tier season. I think it's still very well done, and I get why people like it. But for me, it's, coming down to the point as well of just seasons I personally like better. And in the number 9 spot for me is season 2, The Final Battle. And yeah, like I said, we're in the same territory as season 6, and I think that this is a pretty good season. This season can be controversial amongst fans. I know there are some people who really, really hate the first half and say, well, this season would be a million times better without the first half that they consider filler. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I know there's a portion of people who really don't like the second half and think it's pretty bland and boring. And then I know there's people who just don't like it as a whole. first half or second half. And then there's my opinion, which I think is, this season is pretty good and is fairly underrated in my opinion. For me, the first half, really, I don't think it's that bad. People consider it filler. And really, the weakest episode, I would say, is Double Trouble, which is just kind of a goofy little episode, but it's not that bad. And ultimately, all those episodes in the first half are a point of steadily moving off of a big major point of season 1, and like I said, steadily moving towards a major point of season 2. And ultimately, though, they're not that bad. They're plenty of good adventures, and some of them are pretty action-packed episodes, so nothing wrong with that. And then as we move towards the second half of the season, there's a good transition with like the last voyage and stuff. And then ultimately, the second half on the Dark Island, I think is good as well. Plenty of good things, a new setting. The Dark Island is cool. It was kind of like a jungle type, island that when we first saw it. And then when Garmadon, brought forth the rest of the island, it was a lot of dark, jagged rocks, which is cool. And yeah, ultimately the second half of the season was good as well, with the ninjas fighting the stone army, getting the elemental blades, all that good stuff. And then it led to a battle on the Dark Island, which the ninjas lost. And then, of course, we got the final battle in the last episode of Season 2, which I think is good. I'm not going to say it's the best finale, but definitely still good. And yeah, ultimately, Season 2 is a pretty good season. Like I said, same territory as Season 6. Nothing glaringly wrong, but, just not top tier for me. But definitely still a good rewatchable season. And yeah, that's why it is where it is on this list. And in our number 8 spot is Season 4 Tournament of Elements. And like I mentioned, we're in the territory, same as Season 2 and 6, where I think this is a good season. There's no major glaring problems with it. And I totally understand people who put this, at the top or in their top few spots. I totally get it. I think it is a well done season. And for me, there's no major problems. My biggest issue, and it's not even really that big of an issue, it's the fact that the season kind of went a different direction than I had envisioned and wanted it to go. Like, I totally love the tournament stuff, and when it started steering away from that, my enjoyment went slightly down. Now, that's not to say that it's bad writing or anything, because I still think that it's well done. It's just not personally the story I wanted, but I can't call it a fault in any way, because I know there's plenty of people who still like what they did with the season, and I think that they did a respectable job with it. It's still a well done season. It's just not exactly what I wanted, but this season did so many things right. A big cast of characters with all the elemental masters, and then a goofy villain with Chen, a new setting on Chen's island, and ultimately we just got lots of good, also some backstory to Ninjago, and all in all, this season did many things right, and I still think it's a great season, and I totally understand people putting it high up. For me, there's just better seasons, and, like I said, I do have a couple minor nitpicks with it, but, nothing major. I think it's still a very rewatchable season, and ultimately, well done, and it's just coming down to stuff I personally like better, so, yeah. And for our number 7 spot is going to Season 1, Rise of the Snakes, our first full-length original Ninjago season, and boy is it still good. For me, this number 7 and also the number 6 spot are two seasons that I feel are well done, and they're just, right below top tier seasons for me. I think they're both, well done seasons. Specifically, though, talking about Season 1 here, wow, is it still great to this day? I love just our, major introduction to, getting more into our core ninja team. And we got so many great episodes. And then, of course, we had focus episodes for each of the main ninja and then reaching their true potentials. We had an awesome action-packed 2-part finale. and also the Green Ninja storyline. The Serpentine introduction and the Serpentine army, the original one, is still, very unique and cool to this day. And ultimately, season 1 just has many great things still to offer, and it's a very rewatchable season. If you haven't rewatched it in, some time, definitely go back and rewatch it. It's really, fun to just go back and rewatch classic Ninjago. And really, the only sort of negative, and it's barely a negative in any way, is just the fact that it's early Ninjago writing. It doesn't really detract anything too much, but that's really the only minor nitpick at this. Otherwise, though, it's a very excellently well done season. And like I said, just below top tier. So many great things to offer. And really, it's just great. And again, just coming down to seasons I personally like better, but season 1, you could definitely make a case for it as being still the best Ninjago season. But for me, just below top tier, but I still think it's a very well done season. And yes, in the number 6 spot is the season everybody's been wondering where it placed on my list, and that is Crystalized. Now, I think Crystalized is a good season, but this season is very, very mixed. As of when its release finished, not full HD worldwide, but when the leaked episodes finished, there was very, very mixed reaction. You will see some people that have Crystalized probably placed down where like my Oni trilogy is placed. So, it's a very mixed season. Now, for me, I think it's pretty good. Is that to say that it's perfect? Absolutely not. Clearly, because it would be higher if it was. There's definitely some problems with it. Now, some people may think, well, you have this season that you say has some problems above season 1, a season that you said didn't really have any problems. Well, I think that in this case, the benefits outweigh the negatives, but this season did a lot of things right. The first part of part 1 of Crystalized was the ninjas trying to, I guess, wrap up the events of Cbound. It takes place sometime after that, and then, of course, the ninjas are broken up. But then they get back together to try to bring Nia back to her human form. And then the second half of the first part of Crystalized is consequences of that with the prison arc. And then the last couple episodes of part 1 of Crystalized are really getting into the crystallized aspect of it, which is really cool. And then as far as the second part, well, then it just goes, full into it. Then we have, all the Crystal King generals back, and Harumi and Lloyd, their interactions, and then it really just spans into trying to bring back the Overlord, and then there's just tons of action and tons of battles, tons of interaction with the ninja and, the Crystal King generals and, Lloyd and Harumi especially, tons of moments like that, and then ultimately it kind of gets to the point where the Overlord's back. He resurrects the Oni Temple from the ground, and then brings the Vengestone army to life, gives the Crystal King generals new outfits and weapons, and then it really just kicks into gear from there, where most of the rest of the season is just a massive battle in Ninjago City, which for me I think is fine. It really worked out, and they really stretched it out kind of nicely. I would say there's just a couple dud episodes in there, has some, my kind of negatives with this season, that being Return of the Ice Emperor and Compatible. Those 2 episodes are kind of duds, but again, I think the benefits of this season outweigh the negatives. And then ultimately, though, it ended with a big fight with Lloyd, Garmadon, Harumi versus the Overlord, and it was a good final battle. I'm not going to say the best, but still good in my opinion. And as far as a couple other negatives, I mean, the Oni form for Lloyd, I feel like was kind of wasted, unfortunately. And then Nia, I feel like they did not do a very good job with Nia. Personally, like bringing her back is fine with me, because personally she's one of my favorite ninjas, so I didn't really want her to be fully gone. So it was nice that they brought her back, but I feel like they didn't do her, good justice with her getting her powers back, so soon in the season. It just didn't feel right to me. Now, some people complain about Harumi in this season. For me, I don't mind what they did, because personally, as somebody who was not a fan of the Oni trilogy, it was nice to have Harumi in a season that I appreciate a lot more. Now, of course, I think she was still good in the Oni trilogy, but for me, it's just nice to have her in a season that I think is a lot better. So for me, I liked her redemption arc was fine with me. Could they have just left her alone? Sure. And I know some people will really disagree with me that I think they did a good job with it. But, opinions are opinions. Ultimately, though, I think that there's lots of good things. Also, dragon form I think is cool. A little cheesy how they do it, but is fine with me. Ultimately, though, plenty of good things in Crystalized. Like I said, I think for me, the benefits far outweigh the negatives, and I think Crystalized brings many amazing things to Ninjago. Now, is it perfect? No, but ultimately, I think it's a good season. And for me, I personally like it. I know some people are very critical of it. And for me, I like it. I think that they did a pretty darn good job, all things considered. Again, it's not perfect, but I think what we got was pretty good. And I'm fairly satisfied, all in all, with what we got. Again, not perfect, but I still think they did a good job overall. So, pretty happy with this season as a whole. And starting off our top 5 is season 12 of Prime Empire. And yes, I think that this is an awesome season. I really like this season, and I think it's definitely worthy of top 5. It's just a very fun, vibrant, colorful, unique type of season, and I really enjoy it. And just the idea of it is super cool. I'm a big fan of the Ready Player One movie, and, this leans heavily into that concept, and I think it's just awesome. There's so many great things about this season. I love all the different little adventures the ninjas go on, and like the race, and, getting the katanas, all that stuff. And then, like, later in the season, in the stop drop side scroll episode, like, that's just one of my favorite episodes from this season. And ultimately, again, it's just so colorful, fun, and vibrant, and really just awesome. Unagami's also a pretty darn good villain. The side characters, though, are really cool, and ultimately lots to love from this season. I mean, as far as a couple little criticisms of this season, the Detective Zane episode is kind of a dud. You could really go without watching that, and your life is just fine. And I would say that the finale is definitely sort of rushed. Coming off of, season 11 with the new format of 11-minute episodes, they didn't quite, get it down. They really realized by season 13 that they kind of needed a 2-part finale to make it work better. So it's definitely a little rushed, but for me, it's not that bad. Again, I think this is a case of the benefits far outweigh the negatives, and I think this is a really fun, vibrant, good season. So much to love. And, there's so many great things. The animation is as gorgeous as ever. And then, the ninja suits are cool. Just so many cool things about this season, and just so fun and colorful. I can't say that enough. It's just unique and good, and ultimately very deserving of the top 5 for me personally. And for our number 4 spot is season 7, Hands of Time, and I think this season is awesome. I know this is a very controversial pick for many Ninjago fans, and I think this season is great, and I'm here to tell you why. Many people bash this season, and I think it's unnecessary. This season is really cool. It started off with a banger premiere, went into an amazing second episode, and ultimately, as far as episodes are concerned, I think there's only one kind of dud episode, and that would be Scavengers, and it just kind of drags along. Otherwise, though, I think the rest of the episodes in this season are awesome, and the whole idea with this season is really cool. The concept of controlling time, if done right in media, is one of the greatest concepts they can use, and the time blades are really awesome, and they were used very effectively by both the heroes and the villains of this season. Speaking of those villains, the Time Twins, Crux and Acronix, are awesome villains, and I think that they play off of each other very nicely. And ultimately, this season had tons of action, specifically like episode 70, which is an underrated episode in my opinion, has an episode just dedicated to action and battle, which was really cool. And ultimately, Kai and Nia being the focus is really cool. And there's just so many things to like about this season. Master Wu, this is one of his best seasons in my opinion. And ultimately, it all led to an amazing finale where Crux and Acronix traveled back in time. Also, Master Wu, Nia, and Kai stowed away and helped the original uh, Elemental Master Alliance with Young Wu and Garmadon fight the future Time Twins, which was just awesome. And also the Vermilion Army, I think, was a good army. A nice, interesting take on the Serpentine. I still think the original are better, but at least this army was unique as far as snakes are concerned. And ultimately, so many great things about this season. The one last thing I want to mention is just kind of the animation style of it. A lot of people bash that. For me, I think it's, good. It feels very kind of classic and feels more traditional type of, animation. It feels very old timey in a way, which is good for it feels like traditional type of season. For Ninjago, just storytelling wise, I guess for me, it feels very classic, and oriental, I guess, per se. And for me, I really like that. And I think that's why I push this right above Prime Empire, just because it's more classic feeling. That's not to say that I don't love a good, unique season, because Prime Empire is a great example of that. But for me, this just was barely above Prime Empire. And again, I think this is a very criminally underrated season. I think it's super well done, and people should really give it a rewatch and look on it with some fresh eyes, because it's a really well done season, and I think there's many great concepts about it. And starting off, our number 3 is Cbound, and boy, oh boy, this season is amazing. What more can I say? Actually, a lot, because this season just rocks. This is one of those seasons where I feel is just darn near perfect. I think this season is amazing, and they did so many things right. This season, I would say, doesn't even have a bad episode, in my opinion. I think that's how great this season is, and there's so many good things to love about it. I love the setting and idea of an underwater season. It's a type of concept that I think is just awesome, and they executed it well. And the setting under the ocean was awesome. The city of Merlopia was just amazing. Also, the undersea temple was really cool as well. And just the whole story of this season was just amazing, carrying off of the island, which of course was not so great in my opinion, but boy, this season sure made up for it. And Wojira is just scary, and ultimately the idea of Calamar trying to reawaken Wojira is cool. Later, hunting down the ninja, we also returned to the island of the keepers, and all of this ultimately led to what I really want to talk about, the amazing 4-part finale at the end, which I believe was named The Flood. And really, it's amazing what they did. Like, this season definitely deserved a 4-part finale, and it definitely rocked. They pulled it off really, really well, and it was just an intense, amazing battle in Ninjago with Wojira and Calamar and the Merlopian army, and we got to see a bunch of those mini subs in action, and all in all, it was an amazing battle, so full of action, and this season just rocked in every way. And let's also not forget about emotion, because this season definitely hit you hard by the end, and really we weren't sure where it was going to go after this season, and ultimately this season just did so many things right. And for me, it's just one of those seasons that, it's an amazing watch. And, the last number of times I've watched this season, I've always been impressed. I've not been let down on any rewatch of it. I never felt like I overhyped it for myself. And I think this season still stands up to this day and really is some peak Ninjago in my opinion. And yeah, I'm just running out of good things to say because this season is amazing. So yeah, all in all, for me, definitely easily making the top 3 and one of Ninjago's best pieces of work. So well done. And I think this season just rocks. And for our number 2 spot is Season 3 of Rebooted. Now, anybody who has been with my channel for a while and or has watched my previous Ranking the Ninjago seasons will know that this has switched spots. Now, that's not to say that I don't think this season is amazing, because this season absolutely rocks. And where do I begin? Wow, this season is just amazing. I mean, we got one of the best premieres in Ninjago, if not maybe the best. But I don't know, this is an amazing season. So there's lots of good things to talk about. But yeah, that premiere was awesome. And really, every episode in this season I think is good. There's not a bad one. And ultimately, this season just was so good. I like how it started off with the ninjas, being teachers and then having to get back into action with Cyrus Borg, giving them the Technoblade so they could try to wipe out the digital overlord, which, by the way, in that episode, which was the Digiverse episode, was awesome. And then, the ninjas think they defeated him, and then it ended up leading into an oh crap, the Overlord's still alive type deal, which led to a few amazing episodes where the Overlord is kind of going big or going home with going to space, which I think was awesome. And boy, oh boy, space, the final frontier, that would be a season in Ninjago I wouldn't mind possibly seeing explored. But anyways, those were some amazing episodes, and the Overlord going to space to try to get the golden weapons and mega weapon that were shot into space back in season 2, which was a great tie-in, by the way. And yeah, ultimately led to those amazing episodes. And then, of course, we get to the amazing action-packed finale, the Titanium Ninja, which, oh my gosh, is just awesome. And also, I do not want to forget emotional and gut-wrenching at the same time, because it definitely hit you hard. And this finale is still amazing. And ultimately, this season is just great in basically every way. And as far as some other bonus wins, the ninja suits rocked, the Technoblades were baller, and the ninja vehicles were amazing as well. Sensei Garmadon is pretty awesome as well. And ultimately, this season just had so many amazing things to offer. The Ninjroids were an amazing army as well, and the Overlord in this season was much better than season 2. And yeah, this season just rocked. So ultimately, Rebooted is amazing, and nobody's going to change my mind on that. So for me, definitely an example of a great Ninjago season, and for me, well done. What more can I say? And our number 1 spot is going to Season 5 Possession, and I think this season is absolutely amazing. It's going to pretty much be a rehash of, hey, most of this season is pretty darn great from talking about Season 3 type deal, but this season is really amazing, and I love every aspect of this season. For me, there is not a single bad episode. The premiere is absolutely amazing, and it ultimately led to an amazing 2-part finale. The premiere, the way they introduced Moro and his interaction with Lloyd was just great, and the other ninja trying to promote the tea shop was cool, and them losing their powers, and then it led to a nice climactic fight at the end of the first episode, jumping right into the second episode with an amazing chase, and then we got a great backstory, and then ultimately the whole season's quest of the ninjas trying to stop Moro and then save Lloyd was just great. And again, all in all, it led to an amazing 2-part finale. And not to be outdone, a lot of the episodes before the finale were also great, like Grave Danger is a special standout in my opinion. And ultimately, though, again, just so much great about this season. Nia becoming a water ninja was great as well, and her unlocking her true potential. The Ghost Army is great. Moro, an exceptional, probably my favorite villain in Ninjago and one of my favorite overall characters. And then, everything was just so well done. And I just can't say that enough, because I feel like this season just introduced so many amazing things. The concept of realms, the realm crystal, the amazing sword of sanctuary, which is one of my favorite weapons in Ninjago. Also the arrow blades, and also thinking of the arrow blades, Ronin was a good side character. And yeah, this season just had so much to offer. And for me, it's just easily, ideally, one of the best, in my opinion, the best Ninjago season. And for me, it's just a winner. I enjoy every time I watch it. And yeah, I would be here, all day just talking about how great this season is. So, with that said, this video is pretty long already, and we'll just leave it off with this season is just great. Alrighty, and that now wraps up our updated Ninjago ranking the seasons video. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I just want to mention one thing talking about this video specifically. Some people may wonder why this is a very simple video with just me using the season posters, talking about each season pretty well. And really the answer for me is the fact that I have such limited amounts of time to produce videos. I just don't have a ton of time to do videos, and I would much rather put out content in a more timely-ish fashion than spending probably twice or three times as long on a video to do it way more in depth. I would much rather try to put out content as effectively in a timely manner as I can, and I would much rather just do a simple video like this, get my point across for you guys, instead of spending a ton more extra time to do a much more in-depth video. That's really the reason it's a more simplified video. I still hope you guys enjoyed, hearing my thoughts on all this stuff. And like I said, it's just mostly a time issue for me. If I had more time, I certainly would do a more in-depth video, but I hope you guys still enjoyed. With all that though, again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was super, super fun to do, and I'm really glad that I got to share my updated thoughts on all the Ninjago seasons. So I really hope you guys enjoyed, and ultimately, if you guys could hit that subscribe and like, that'd be appreciated. I'm not going to pry at you guys to do that though. If you want to, great. If not, whatever. So ultimately, again, hope you guys enjoyed. Can't wait to see you all in the next video. So peace out and thanks.